toward the end of the 60s, is that when the rumors about you being dead surfaced? Do you remember that? Do you remember how that started? What were your feelings about that?
Yeah, no, what happened was we did a cover for a record called Abbey Road. The idea was to walk across the crossing, and I showed up that day with sandals, flip-flops, and so it was so hot, and I kicked them off and walked across barefooted. So this started some rumor that because he was barefooted, he's dead. But it was a little bit strange because people did start looking at me like, is it him or a very good double?
Well, that was the idea. That was the other part of it, that there was a guy who looked like you taking your place.
No, well, this is him.
Or is it?
Hello, Tom. What's going down? I was going to rant with you about McCartney being dead. What is this all about?
In October 1969, a disc jockey in Detroit received a call from a listener explaining that if some Beatles songs were listened to closely, clues would be heard.
Number 9, number 9, number 9, number 9.
Play this Revolution number 9 backwards.
Even though there were past attempts to spread the rumor, this time it really took off.
At 1 o'clock WABC chime time. The fact that there's something very strange about the Beatle Paul. The fact that the Beatle Paul may be dead.
McCartney was killed 3 years ago in an auto accident and a double put in his place.
That a rumor had circulated through London that Beatle Paul McCartney had been killed in a car crash on the M1 motorway.
There arose a rumor that Paul was really not Paul, but an imposter.
Theory on Paul's death says he was out alone in his Aston Martin. He crashed and was decapitated. A Paul McCartney look-alike has been impersonating him ever since. The fans say they can prove it in the songs, in the jackets to the record albums, and in other places. Clues by the dozen are lurking.
3 of the Beatles wear a red rose, while McCartney wears a black rose. Paul is the only one standing with his back to the camera. Inside the cover, McCartney's look-alike is wearing an armband with the letters OPD, which in England means officially pronounced dead.
The McCartney situation is real. They replaced him with somebody special and did some plastic surgery. Calipers on the bridge of the nose will show that there were not 1 but 2. Did the measurements and everything. My Lord, there are 2. Then we got Dr. Henry Truby.
Dr. Henry Truby.
Somebody else was singing at a time when the fans and when the label would indicate that it was Paul McCartney.
Are you really telling us that the original Paul McCartney was not the later Paul McCartney, that there really was a double?
It really is. It's more like it. Come on! It's the best Paul McCartney we've had. Refined, cleaned, groomed, and had more talent than the first one.
It had been 4 years of instant success. The Beatles had become gods.
Nobody heard anything, or not even, a basic beat, I don't think. So they were too busy tearing each other up.
I have prepared a statement which I will read, which has had John Lennon's absolute approval this afternoon with myself by telephone. And this is as follows. The quote which John Lennon made to a London columnist more than 3 months ago has been quoted and represented entirely out of context.
When John said the Beatles meant more to kids than Jesus, a Beatles boycott in the southern states began as the Beatles toured the U.S. for the last time in August 1966. They burned their records and spit on their images. But before they burned the records, they had to buy them.
We meant more to kids than Jesus did. I was just saying it as a fact. I was using expressions on things that I just read.
The Passover plot speculates that the Bible is a hoax and that Jesus didn't die on the cross. Jesus survived, and in order to create a new religion with himself as the Messiah, he made people believe that he'd risen from the dead.
He said to me once that the children of 2000 will be listening to the Beatles.
By 2012, the masses will be where we are today, and Paul should be Jesus by then.
On August the 29th, 1966, the Beatles took the stage for the final date of their third sellout tour of America. But this would be the last ever Beatles concert.
We were just tired, you know. It had been 4 years legging around screaming in this mania, you know, that we weren't going to tour again.
We said, well, what are we going to do? Like, announce it? The Beatles have given up touring. We said, no, just don't say anything.
But I was really too scared to walk away. I was thinking, well, this is like the end, really. You know, there's no more touring. And I was dead nervous, so I said yes to Dick Lester, that I would make this movie with him. I went to Almeria, Spain for 6 weeks.
Ringo came to Spain when John and I were down there. George, like I said, was doing the Indian stuff at that time. What was Paul doing? I don't know what he was doing.
Tuesday, September 13th, 1966, the Melody Makers Awards would be the last time a camera caught a glimpse of Paul McCartney for the next 3 months. Because of Paul's absence, rumors suggested he'd left the band and the Beatles were breaking up. Beatles manager Brian Epstein had to make a statement on October 3rd, denying that Paul had left the band, but confirming they would never perform live in concert ever again.
The Beatles have kept pretty much to themselves in the last 7 or 8 months. There have been thousands of rumors about their breakup. They'd say they're not going to tour anymore. They're not going to travel around.
Hey, can I have a word? Are the Beatles going to go their own ways in 1967?
They could be, you know, on our own or together. We're always involved with each other, whatever we're doing. I mean,
do you foresee a time when, in fact, the Beatles won't be together and that you'll all be on your own?
No.
Do you have you got tired of each other?
No.
When we got into the Sgt. Pepper sessions, I mean, they were obviously different people to what it was just weird and a lot of sadness around, and it wasn't sort of spoken of a lot, and I think a lot of stuff was getting bottled up, and it was Paul that sort of, you know, pushed them all the time, you know.
Let me take you down, 'cause I'm going to strawberry fields. Nothing is real, you're significant. Slavy rebels.
All sounded like I buried Paul. But we didn't even think of that. Of course, there's a slight chance that John did without telling me.
End of Strawberry Fields, I'm saying cranberry sauce. Cranberry sauce, not I buried Paul. And the rumour was started, obviously, by some madman.
set out strawberry fields forever. We were convinced a few lads had discovered its message, but nothing else.
When the Liverpool people came here to London, they brought with them the freedom, the money they'd made. A centre is what is needed. That's what the bookshop here, Indica, was designed. But the bookshop wasn't enough. A newspaper seemed to be the only way to get them all to meet.
One of the staff members and a co-founder held a competition in the first issue of the newspaper. His name was Jan Iarkomo, apparently a Polish filmmaker. The same Jan Iarkomo who ran this ad in the next issue. The same Jan Iarkomo who contributed to the Church of the Final Judgment and their magazine, The Process. The same Jan Iarkomo who engaged his friend Yoko Ono to perform an exhibition at his own Indica gallery.
She was having a show at this gallery. So anyway, I finally got to this show, and she had all these things on, like all these like hammer nail things, and that clock there, you listen to it through a stethoscope, all the things. There was this ladder and a thing on the ceiling. So I climbed the ladder, and on the ceiling it said, yes. But it said yes, and that was enough, you know. And then she came up and said she didn't know who I was.
Neither of you know about it. Yoko came around to my house.
She knew who the Beatles were because
she had met him.
She met you.
Yeah.
She knew of the Beatles.
Neither of you know about it.
I don't know, you
but
know.
Of course, I mean, if she knocked on your door, she knew you were a Beatle.
The same Jan Iarkomo that wrote Paperback Writer. The same Jan Iarkomo whose name backwards sounds like, listen, Jan Iarkomo, Paul McCartney.
So Maya was anyway telling me on to a lot of that International Times, Evergreen, all those little things. Lots of very far out, and we used to do a lot of that.
This means that someone like Paul McCartney is on the scene and have supported it in both direct and indirect ways, and will probably say we have the same concept of freedom as he does. I've all found a certain similarity in their aims, more intimate and direct.
So, way before John met Yoko and got avant-garde, I was like the avant-garde London bachelor with Miles, my pad in St. John's Wood. I was making like 8 movies and we were showing them to Antonioni. I was into quite a sort of heavy avant-garde trip. I'd sit with Burroughs in a basement, and I remember sitting around with Burroughs, you know, to do little tapes and backward crazy stuff.
Sell out your sons forever.